There's nothing I love more than a Grand Prix weekend where Sunday's race gets full marks, but the vibes are so bad it's like the unholy child of fingernails on a blackboard and the brown note. Kia ora, I'm Kimmy, I talk F1 in the world's second worst accent, and these are my 3 conclusions from the 2025 Sao Paulo Grand Prix. Yes, I'm going to kick it off with that penalty. I've seen a lot of chatter online about McLaren's disinterest in protesting Oscar's lap 6 restart penalty, mostly from Oscar fans who are incensed that Andrea Stella didn't immediately do a Christian Horner and show up to the steward's office with a bunch of printouts. Hang on, let me just... That's better. This is clearly a sign that McLaren isn't going to go into bat for Oscar, even when the penalty is so deeply unfair. And look, even Charles Leclerc agrees. Antonelli closed the door when he had room. Why aren't Zach Brown and Andrea Stella giving the stewards a dressing down over their incompetence? Oh, sorry. My bad. And look, I get it. I understand why this was a pretty disappointing outcome, but here's the thing. This penalty is a direct consequence of the requests made by the GPDA, aka the drivers, for more clear guidelines around what is and what isn't going to be penalised. And based on those guidelines and the expectation they bring consistency to the judgment table, the stewards had no real option other than to penalise Oscar, as he both did not have his front axle alongside Kimi consistently throughout the corner, and was locked up during the move. As has been discussed over and over by many pundits, journalists, and yes, YouTubers, the rigidity of the racing guidelines and the black and white nature of decision making in the name of transparency and consistency is producing judgments that, were more nuance involved, make very little sense. And that's the key thing, nuance. You can't have nuance unless you have consistency. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy that has its roots in the voluntary stewarding system. And I know you're all fed up with me talking about this, so I'm not going to go into detail again. You can watch one of my other videos if you're new here and don't know my position on it. But the reason why the guidelines exist in their current form is due to the consistent shifting of opinion around the decision table and the varying opinions, and yes, probably biases, of whoever was sitting at it on any given race weekend. The drivers asked for these guidelines because the system sucks. The guidelines are being interpreted in a binary manner because the drivers wanted to know exactly where they stand when going for an overtake in every possible scenario. And despite the guidelines being clearly defined as just that, guidelines and not hard and fast rules, the document itself states that some subjective judgment must be taken. In a system where stewards don't have the confidence to stand behind their decisions without referring to some sort of rulebook, they will always default to the one that provides them with the most justification. What this has done is create a situation where wily drivers can game the system by ensuring they're always on the correct side of the prescriptive rules, while others are being penalised for racing, not only in race with time penalties, but also with penalty points, when these kind of things would probably be judged a racing incident by most people experienced in actually racing a Formula 1 car. And yes, I acknowledge there is always a driver steward, but quite often that driver steward hasn't raced in 35 years. I mean, the whole reason Piastri locked up in the first place is because even though he had his car in the right position as he started the corner entry, he could see the door shutting and tried to give himself a bit more space. That then had the consequence of putting him down in a position where he no longer had the right to the corner according to the racing guidelines, because he'd slowed down enough for his wheels to be in a different position in relation to Antonelli's car. He was at the mercy of whatever Kimi did from that point on because he couldn't scrub the speed off fast enough, and boom. Sorry buddy, enjoy your 10 seconds to catch your breath and think about what you've done. Had he kept his nose in, the outcome probably would have been race ending, but hey, at least Kimi would have been the one with the penalty, am I right? So you have to ask yourself, what would have been the point of McLaren arguing the point in this scenario? These rules exist in the first place thanks to requests made by the drivers for more consistent decisions. What are they going to achieve? Probably not a whole lot other than a bit less pocket change down the back of the couch. So the conclusion here is always the same. Permanent and paid. It's not like F1 can't afford it. I am a broken record. So then, Max. A bit of a blow to his championship hopes this weekend, but there is a small shining light, and it's his new engine. Now, contrary to what you might expect, if you go back and compare some telemetry data from Max's Q1 laps in Brazil and previous events, he wasn't actually losing a whole lot of time to Lando on the straights in comparison to earlier in the year. They've been pretty consistently within 1 or 2 kilometers an hour of one another in the DRS zones during qualifying, And yes, on Saturday, Max was about 3 or 4 kph down, but it's not like he was missing a huge chunk of power where it mattered. However, this strategic choice to start Max from the pit lane not only benefited him from a setup standpoint, but it also means he has a little bit more leeway than McLaren for the last 3 weekends should something go pop in the back end of Norris or Piastri's cars. He also reverted to the old floor after the sprint, and while that didn't help him much in the Grand Prix qualifying, whatever they learned was enough to make effective changes that gave him great race pace. Now, we'll never know if he could have gone from pit lane to a win had he not had that puncture early on in his stint on the hards. I'm inclined to say no, not because he didn't have the pace, but because he ended up so far offset from the rest of the field with that early stop that it meant he benefited from a lot of those in front of him pitting or, yeah, unfortunately retiring. This effectively meant that he had a whole lot more clear air than he probably would have done had he had to fight his way past all 18 cars that started on the grid. Yeah, maybe he could have done a one-stop, maybe that might have worked, but we'll never know. Might he have maintained track position if he'd stayed on the mediums and pipped Kimi to second? Again, we'll never know. What is evident though is that Max being the underdog is just a joy to watch. He had this really super chilled demeanour on Sunday despite the odds being stacked against him, and this kind of what happens happens, the best we can do is stick with what we know works approach might just be the thing that keeps it interesting right up until Abu Dhabi. It's looking pretty damn unlikely, but in my opinion that's why we should keep paying close attention. And lastly, there was a big moment in the post-race press conference that really showed Lando Norris is absolutely #done with people asking questions about his mentality. And I'll tell you what, good on you, Lando, for shutting that down in such an emphatic manner. There is nothing that I enjoy more than watching a reporter asking a stupid question and getting absolutely schooled by the response. I love it when Lewis does it, I love it when Max does it, and I thoroughly enjoyed watching Lando do it. If you're not up to speed with this one, I've put the link to the official transcript down in the description, but the TLDR of it is that Lando was effectively accused of having a loser's mentality, not directly, but that was the implication, for playing down McLaren's chances in Las Vegas, to which Lando came back with a response that basically told the guy to sit down, shut up, and listen to somebody who actually knows what they're talking about. You know, rather than just letting the guy try to spin his words into some kind of self-deprecating woe is me maudlin attitude. You go, Lando Norris. It's clear that Lando has reached that point in his life and his career where he's no longer prepared to put up with this narrative that surrounded him for pretty much all of his time in a Formula One cockpit. And he's ready to start fighting back. Your move, media. So that's it. That's my 3 conclusions from the 2025 Sao Paulo Grand Prix. I'd love to see you chat about yours down in the comments. Thanks so much for watching to the end. An extra special thanks to my patrons for their continued support. Don't forget to click the like button and subscribe to my channel if you enjoyed this video. I'll be back very shortly, unpacking a whole lot of stuff around John Elkann's recent rage bait comments about Ferrari's performance over the weekend in the course of the season. It might even be up here in the corner by the time you're watching this video. Ka kite, I'll catch you next time.